Welcome to Baruch Menache's podcast. This is a space for rigorous exploration of human development, psychology, and social interactivity. Each episode examines the underlying structures of thought, behavior, and interaction, offering insights drawn from education, research, and philosophical reflection. Here we engage deeply with ideas, question assumptions, and illuminate the patterns that shape both individual growth and collective experience. Join me as we unpack complex concepts and translate them into understanding, perspective, and meaningful dialogue. The imagined persona, that is the futuristic ideal of one's stature within a hierarchical structure, can be in service of a social process, all while being delineated of full participation. Since the first modality is imagination, all that comes after it is of no consequence, as though a dream scenario which doesn't pertain to reality, as it were. The reason one has the ability to imagine themselves futuristically is that they apply the social data, the constituents within a closed hierarchical system, to be denigrated, that is, to be less than of the fulfilled persona. They are not to participate at that level, so that now one is utilizing the true inference of sociality, as it were, connected to the reality framework, to ascertain an imaginative role of their place within that spectrum. One is now available to act upon that imaginative role, and to do so in vitalization of the denigration of what surrounds them. Thus, one must maintain a hierarchical structure to be a part of. That is, it cannot be universality or complex social systems, but rather enclosed so that it is a definite proof that one is being denigrated to the statured imaginative self. Secondly, through that enclosement, one is statured above that denigrated process. That is, the first point of thought is external constituents in denigrated process, but more so the expectation that is unfulfilled to which their statured persona is fulfilled. Thus, the first point of entry is expectation. Second point, projected on beings in lack of fulfillment of that expectation. Third, denigrating those beings. And fourth, one's meeting at an expectative level, thus be statured within that sequence. Now they are participants and statured as such, but more so they are in imaginative role, since it is not a pertaining social inference that places them at the behest of that stature, but rather a psychological process that enabled them to do so. This is different than pridefulness or other connotations of utilizing one's exemplified social status, which in that case, it is true that the social inferences raise them above the masses, above the hierarchical system, so that they are not fulfilling that psychological process. It is being implied upon them. And to follow it in that implication is thus to be prideful, is to be implicated in such stature, but it is not in denigration of the external beings. It's rather the external beings who self-denigrate in order to stature and proclaim them as the authority position in the hierarchical system. The difference is quite large, because in the latter case, there is no psychological makeup that engendered this process. It is merely a happenstance of which one followed the identification to which it would be called prideful. In the former case, one begins the very process to create for themselves an imaginative role. It is possibly true in the nature of the external beings, but that is not the will of their psychological process, but more so the will is to begin through denigration and thus statured authority. Once one is a statured authority, they can then begin to view from that vantage point social process, and in that way protected of social inference, because although imaginative, they are in a statured position, all social process is now delineated away from them because of their statured role. It is rather the entire process of their being to continue in that statured authority, thus to make decisions of social inference from that vantage without the effect of the dynamical reciprocation. They are able to remain stagnant, as it were, without consequence, and to follow a supposition without remediation and any and all negative connotation is not received, since they are already statured above that, and more so because they are using the sociality of the external beings to fulfill their process. They are not following sociality, as it were, in a circumstantial and infrastructural manner. They are simply following the being themselves they have denigrated to a point where it is as though they are extracting their sociality to continue their process. They are being corporal because they are not fulfilling the social inference itself. They are not extracting in a manner where they are affected by it. They are merely exemplifying it as a point of sociality for which they follow. Thus, this process is highly individualistic. It requires specific individuals to extract in their vulnerability of denigration to continue their procedural corporal process, as it were. However, being that it is both corporal and imaginative, it is far distant from societal process or any concern of good or bad or purposeful or unpurposeful. It is specifically areas of activity within society that are generally detestable in its fundamental nature, so that instead of gaining awareness of their stance of being a detestable process of society, they maintain a denigration, that is, to receive the vulnerability of individuals that take part in their process, to oppose themselves above it and beyond it, and then to perform the corporal process without adhering to the societal inference in a broader spectrum. Thank you for listening. I appreciate your input, and please subscribe and send to those who you think are relevant to receive such information.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.